introduction, my name is Joe. I'm with Suite Solutions. A couple quick words about Suite Solutions. The vision of our company is to enable you to engage your customers by providing quick access to relevant information. And we believe that DITA provides a foundation for that as a documentation format, as an interchange format, as a data format. And that's why we're here today. But I think that it's important for us to, as we go through this, and as you go through your decision making, whether to use DITA, start implementing DITA, always remind yourself what the end goal is. The end goal is to get something better than what you have now. And our belief is, and the belief of a lot of our customers, people that we work with, is at the end of the day we want to provide a better experience for our customers, giving them information that's useful. We've been in business for about close to 8 years. Mostly with DITA implementations, but also other XML-based authoring, publishing solutions. We have a SuiteShare social knowledge-based platform, which at some point maybe we'll have the opportunity to discuss. We have a consultancy, as well as an application development vendor. At that point, I'm going to continue. Now, the main topics of the DITA Quick Start for authors is as follows: the introduction to XML, overview of DITA, as you see on the screen. We're probably going to get to the first 2 bullet points in this session, and we'll get to the last 3 in the following session. But we'll see how far we can get. So what we're going to start with is discussing why XML. Why are we going through this in the first place? And the reason is because as documentation developers, as information providers, we have certain challenges. And as you look through these challenges, maybe you'll recognize some of them as challenges that you also have experienced. But in general, many companies decide to migrate to an XML for multi-purpose documents for multiple products. A lot of companies these days have a lot of products. Products are similar to each other. There's a lot of reuse, different configurations, different audiences, etc. So the idea of providing a more effective way to provide multi-purpose documents. Another challenge is that companies are having more and more is for multi-channel publishing into many formats. It used to be called single sourcing. Multi-channel single sourcing is the same idea. Whereas a couple of years ago we were talking about publishing to PDF, HTML help, website. Now we're talking about those 3 plus mobile. We're talking about EPUB, we're talking about getting onto tablets, we're talking about interfacing with enterprise systems such as Salesforce or Jive or things like this. So the question or the challenge of multi-channel publishing into multi-formats is not getting any easier. In fact, it's getting even more challenging. Another big reason why a lot of companies move to XML is to reduce localization desktop publishing costs. As more and more companies are marketing and selling their products overseas, wherever you may be, overseas is somewhere else, right? So you need to provide information in different languages. That's expensive, and then publishing that content to different languages is also expensive. The desktop publishing. So there's a big push to reduce that cost, or to be able to produce content in more languages using the same budget. That generally provides the biggest ROI. By the way, if you're talking about building a return on investment or a business case for moving to XML, that usually, very often, is the thing that sticks out the most. Reuse of content for multiple documents across the organization, product lifecycle. We talk about across the organization. A lot of companies are talking about sharing content between documentation and training, with support, marketing information. We talk about product lifecycle. We're talking about information being used during the sales process, during the marketing process, through to installation, through to use, through to administration, troubleshooting, and down to an upgrade. So often we'll see content will find itself in reused in different places during the product lifecycle. The idea is reusing that content, changing it once and having it percolate through all the different deliverables. And lastly, provide more accessible and searchable and focused updated content to customers, whether they be internal customers, external customers. Content's changing all the time. Content needs to be accessed all the time. Search, the idea of focus of not relying on Google. Google is great, but it's not the panacea of the world. The idea is more and more trying to get the focused information to the customer. Whoever is reading the content at the time, understanding who they are, what they need to be doing, and try to focus the content to the customer. And we can talk about that more in various sessions as we move forward to the Quick Start series. So, why XML? Like, how is XML going to help us with this? So XML helps us to better manage content. Why? So XML essentially separates the formatting from the content. It separates the structure from the content and the application from the content. If you're using FrameMaker or Word or InDesign for your content right now, so you understand that your content is inextricably mixed up or integrated with the formatting of the document. Okay, XML basically separates the actual content, the words, right, from how it looks. Also separates the structure from the content. Often you can take heading levels or sections and reuse them in different places. The content looks different or it behaves different, often depending on where it is in the structure of the content. It also allows you to separate the application from the content. When you're using FrameMaker, you're using a FrameMaker file. You want to open the FrameMaker file, you need FrameMaker. Okay, you're using Word, you need Word. You need that application called Word. Using InDesign, etc. XML is a standard format. You can use lots of different applications for authoring the content, for managing the content, publishing the content. So basically, puts you in a standard format or in a standard really that separates your content and really insulates it from any particular technology. Now, once you move into XML, people talking about migrating to XML or converting their content to XML. The idea is that once you're in an XML or a structured format, then you should be in a position where you're not going to encounter any more expensive conversions of your content. Now, XML allows authors to focus on writing and not formatting. So we mentioned just a couple seconds ago that XML essentially separates the formatting from the content. We're going to see that an example of that. And because of that, it allows your authors to focus on the writing and not the formatting. So, there's a lot of us have become big experts in FrameMaker and Word and how to format the documents. And when we're not busy fighting with the desktop publishing tool, we're actually able to get across and do some writing. And on the one hand, that makes us a little bit nervous. On the other hand, it's a big opportunity to be able to focus on really what the content is and not the formatting. It permits multiple outputs to be applied to the same content. We talked about that. That's the multi-channel part. It allows you to add new outputs without affecting the authoring process. We talked about before. If you had XML 3 years ago and you were doing PDFs, now you're in a good position to be producing EPUB and mobile help and all these other things we talked about before. Okay, so the same content, more outputs. Okay, we'll talk more about that as we move through. Allows the content to be managed based on its hierarchy and the structure. We'll see more about that, how that really, how that expresses itself when we talk about maps. So the basic idea is that when we talk about DITA, we talk about topic-oriented publishing, topic-oriented content. Allows you to author and manage that content based on the hierarchy and the structure, not based on where it fits in some kind of a monolithic document. Again, we'll see more as we go through examples of that. So a couple minutes or a minute or two about history and what XML is, where it came from. So if I was sitting in the room with you, I'd ask you, raise your hand if you've ever heard of SGML. Okay, actually you guys can raise your hands on the dashboard there. If you want to humor me, you can raise your hand if you've heard of XML or SGML before. SGML stands for Standard Generalized Markup Language, and really it's thanks everybody. So we're all used to, or a lot of us have seen HTML files. We've seen those funny looking tags, the angle brackets. So, and we know about nesting things and HTML opening and closing tags. So that's really, actually SGML really invented that. Now, text-based languages are not new. Meaning there's been many times before other standards where you take text and content and then put all kinds of crazy markup around it and in order to try to apply format or apply some kind of information about that. If I was in the same room with you, I'd ask you if you know one. So if you want, you can maybe add it into the chat window. Okay. But HTML is not the first one to make up a text format, but it is the first one to make up this thing with the angle brackets and the nested tags and the elements and the attributes. Okay? HTML is really a HTML, an instance of an HTML standard. Okay? XML is also an instance of an HTML standard. Okay? So why XML? Okay, why don't we just stay with HTML? So HTML, turns out, is pretty complex. Has a lot of really cool features. I don't know if you guys hang around with developers, but developers often have really cool features and they really have really cool functionality. You can do this and you can do that, but after you've got all that really cool stuff, so you've got a monstrosity that's very difficult to use and to manage. So that's really what happened with HTML. It became very expensive, very difficult. If you were an airline company, had a couple $1 million to throw around, great. If you're a pharmaceutical company, great. But people like you and me didn't have that kind of money. So XML became a subset of HTML to be able to, it's the 80-20 rule type of thing. Let's get the most functionality we can and leave it behind the complexity. And that's really what XML is. Okay, so XML is, we talk about XML, we talk about structure, we talk about markup. So markup describes the content in the document. If I was in the same room with you, I'd ask you, okay, does anyone know what semantics means? Okay. So semantics means meaning. Okay, so we're basically using tags to describe the meaning of the content and what the content is as opposed to how it's supposed to look. Okay? We'll talk more about that. So XML uses things called elements and attributes. Elements, you can see in those in the brackets, like task step has the less than sign, the greater than sign, and then a closing tag. Okay, those are called elements. Attributes are kind of like little metadata, little information about the elements. So for example, we have a task element, which would represent information about a procedure. And then we have attributes that say, okay, this has a particular unique ID. I can reference it in a link, for example. And it also is relevant to a particular type of audience. So that's an example of an attribute. Now, in addition to that, there's a couple of rules about XML, like every element has to have an open tag and a closed tag. And the elements must be nested. So if you have a task, inside that task you can have a step, right? So you have an open up the task, enter in a bunch of steps, and then close the task. And that's what's called nesting. Okay. Now, again, we're going to see this for those of you who will join us next, we're going to see this in a lot of detail. So the question becomes, okay, now we have all these elements and we have the attributes. So which markup can you use? So I can make up tags. I can make up something called task or procedure or ice cream or chocolate or whatever I want. I can make up tags, okay, in elements. Or you can also. Okay, and the question becomes, which elements or which markup can you use? So if you want people to be able to understand what elements and attributes are in your document, right, you need some kind of rule sheet. Okay, the rule sheet is called a document type definition, or DTD. Okay, if we look at try to parse out the English words, we have a document type definition, defining what kind of document it is and what's inside that document. Okay, now it turns out that there are two competing standards these days for how you can define what the markup can look like. Okay, one is called a DTD, the other is called a schema. Schema is a word, but it's also a proper noun, meaning you'll hear people in the XML world talking about DTD or a schema. It turned out in DITA, by the way, that DITA has a DTD and also has a schema. I think most, if we're in the same room, maybe you can throw things at me and tell me I'm wrong, but in our experience, the vast majority of folks are using DTDs, although there are tools and people who are using schemas also. Okay, a parser is a computer program that validates that the markup, those elements and attributes, follow your DTD, follow your rule sheet. Now, I have some text there in blue. Okay, those are not just words. They're not just English words, but they're proper nouns. So you'll hear people in the XML world talking about a parser, and they mean that program that sits somewhere, right? That's constantly validating that your markup follows your rule sheet. Okay, now there's two things. There's something called valid DITA or valid XML and well-formed XML. Well-formed XML means that you have opening tags and closing tags, and you follow the basic rules. But valid XML means that your XML actually follows the DTD, meaning all the elements in there are in the DTD, they're in the right order, okay, etc. Now, a parser is used in different times or different parts of your tool set. It's usually used during your authoring. So, as you're authoring, the authoring tool is constantly running a parser that's telling you which elements you can put in there according to the rule sheet. For example, if I might have a document or topic, a DITA topic, and I might say, okay, the DITA topic, the rule says inside of my topic, first I must have a title, and then I can have a set of steps. Inside of the set of steps, I might have an example, right? And I might have a prerequisite, but the prerequisite must come before the set of steps, not in the middle, not at the end. Okay, so the parser is running around and making sure that you're entering the prerequisite before the first step, and you're not entering it in the middle of the step. And you're putting the title before the first prerequisite, and you're not putting it at the end. Things like that. Okay? And it makes sure that the documents follow the rules of the standard. Okay, so an XML standard is really a set of elements and attributes that everyone agrees to use. Okay, so for example, us folks as technical writers got together and said, let's make a standard called DITA. Okay, but there's other people in the world who have other XML standards, programmers for different types of information exchange. If you're in finance, they have their own XML standard about how they model their information. So people get together, band together, and say, we have a certain type of information. We want to model that information into a set of elements and attributes and rules. We put it together, we form a standard, okay, and then and we all agree to use it. Whereas us humans like to do, we like to break it or complain about it and things like that. But the truth is that once we have a standard, then we have the benefit of being able to take advantage of the tools and the implementations that other folks have done before us that are also following the standard. Okay. Now, others widely used standards, maybe you've heard of these. And besides DITA, another one's called S1000D. S1000D is used in the aerospace and defense industry. It's actually very similar to DITA in the fact that it's topic oriented. We'll talk about that. SCORM is a standard and used in training, e-learning. ATA and iSpec, that's used in the aerospace industry. DocBook is used, maybe you've heard of that. DocBook is often used for reference publishing, and there's some technical writers who use DocBook also. Although the trend is to move from DocBook for technical publications to move from DocBook into DITA. So if we kind of put all this stuff into context, okay, this looks a little bit scary, but we'll try to. I think it'll really illustrate some things. So if we say that XML is the mother standard here, right? Okay, so XML is a subset or a standard that fits inside the XML. Okay, and DITA is in there, and DocBook and S1000D are in there also. Now, if you notice here, HTML is kind of on the cusp, right? It's not exactly an XML. It's not exactly. It's not fully out either. And the reason why is because HTML really is not legal XML. Okay, maybe you guys can think about that, about why that is. I'll let you think about that for a second. But XHTML is basically HTML that follows XML standard. Okay. ATA 2200, that's the aerospace standard. It's also kind of sits on the cusp there. It's not really XML. It's not really legal XML. Now, if we look at the scale here of complexity, okay, and structure, okay. So if we look at a phone book, right? A phone book is something that's very structured, right? Name, address, okay, etc. But it's really not so complex. It's very simple, right? Very simple information. If you look at a brochure or a novel or the homepage that we put together, so it's not so structured, right? You can have a title, you can have some line items and some tables and stuff like that. Okay. A newspaper is not so structured. Maybe you have a title, byline, a bunch of paragraphs, and sometimes we like to think that depending on the newspaper and the publisher, that the content could be complex. Okay. Okay, and they would use something like maybe DocBook or something. That's why home pages here are usually done in HTML. HTML is meant for relatively simple and relatively less structured content. Okay, we go up in the upper right quadrant here. Let's talk about AMM. AMM is a aircraft maintenance manual. IPC is a illustrated parts catalog. So this content is highly structured and highly complex. Okay, and there's standards that are complex and structured that fit that, to try to service that, like ACA 2200 and S1000. And now if you notice here, DITA kind of sits here in the middle here. Okay, now one of the cool things about DITA, which we're going to talk about, is that DITA has this uncanny ability to kind of surf up and down this spectrum here. DITA has that possibility of actually becoming more structured and more complex, or less structured and less complex. I'll let you think about why that is. And now to answer the question before, HTML is not really legal XML because in HTML you can have an opening tag without a closing tag. Okay, that's not legal according to XML. Okay, for example, BR tag, those of you guys who know a little bit of HTML. Okay, we're going to move on. Okay, so let's kind of go through the process together of moving from format to structure. So if I were to look at a very simple procedure, a simple task card here, okay? So we look at this, we would see, at the left, we see, okay, we have some formatting. We're all used to looking at styles, right? Style heading 1. Okay, in this case, someone did something that's probably processing in the technical writing world. They actually applied a style, and then they applied custom or overrode the formatting. In any case, we have a heading 1. On the left side there, we have some sorry about that. We have a heading 2. We have some content here, equipment code and skill code that is styled a certain way. We have a warning that's really normal. Okay, we have a table here. And we have a heading 2, and we have some other content. Now, from the point of view of structure, okay, we have a title. Okay, it's not just a heading 1. Okay, this is the title of the card. We have an equipment type. We have a skill code. We have some keywords. This thing over here is a warning. It's not just a normal paragraph. Okay, we know that. The structure is the semantics of this is a warning. It's not just a regular paragraph. And here we'd have a table. It's not just a regular old table. This is a set of steps. Okay? And here we have text here. This is not just a text. This is actually a part number. And this is really a circuit breaker number. Okay? Sorry. Put this back on. Okay. So we go to the next step. We can say, okay, we had we were looking at a task card. Let's build an archetype of the structure of a task card. So really a task card, right, includes the entire document instance. It has a title, one title. It can have one equipment type, one skill code, etc. It could have some keywords, and then it has a set of steps. Can we notice the step can have, a task can have one step, or can have more than one step. Okay, and inside the step we have a bunch of information, text that people typed in. We can have some warning. We can have some circuit breakers and part numbers, etc. And also maybe some metadata about who signed off on it. You get the idea. So we think about what the information architecture is of a task card. This is what we would see. Okay, now I'm kind of I'll kind of throw the little hints here and there, but these little symbols that you see, the asterisk and the question mark, okay, and things like that, this is actually syntax that you'll see inside of a DTD, inside of a document type definition file. Okay. Now if we move one step forward and say, okay, now we can turn this archetype into those tags, those elements that we talked about. So the task card tag starts off the document, and it ends down here with a closing tag. Okay. Now inside the task card I have a title, open and close, or a skill code, open and close. Then I have a step. Now inside the step I can have some warning and circuit breakers and all kinds of stuff like that. And I close the step. Okay, and then at the end, after one or more steps, I can close the task card. Okay, and if I were to see, it would look something like this on the right side. Now, if we're going to finish up the process, the migration, then we would see this. So we basically, now we see the entire document in structured XML format, where we've basically taken that format, we've created an information architecture from it, we've created tags, we've translated that architecture into tags and content into the tags, and now we basically have an XML file that represents the same page that we saw before. So this is basically the process that we go through with a mental exercise, to go from a formatted document, an unstructured document, to a structured XML document. Hope that's clear. Okay, so let's talk about how all this DTD and everything fits together. If we have a document instance, the document instance really consists of an XML file and some graphics, media, whatever we have inside there. Oops. Okay. Now the structure rules, the DTD and the schema, informs what that document instance needs to look like. Okay, what tags needs to be in there, what attributes needs to be there, what order things need to be in. Okay. The structure rules informs the presentation rules, or what we call the style sheet. Okay, meaning if we want to turn our document to look something like something, right, then we need to create a series of rules of how to transform our XML content into something that looks like a document. Okay, that's what we call a style sheet. And style sheets these days we use things called XSL, which is called Extensible Style Sheet Language, or XLFO. Formatting objects, that's what we use for PDF. And CSS, maybe you guys have heard of CSS. CSS is cascading style sheets. That's what a web browser will use to apply formatting to an HTML document. Okay, and back then in the HTML world, they used other things called DISL and all kinds of other stuff. Classy, maybe you've heard of those. Okay, so we have a document, we have structure rules, we have a DTD. DTD informs what can be in the XML file, and informs what needs to be represented inside the style sheets. In the end, we get a published document. Oops. Okay. We get our PDF, HTML file, etc. Now it's very interesting. Once you have XML, you can basically transform it into anything, right? That's the multi-channel publishing we spoke about. So a lot of people are still publishing PDFs. Even though a lot of people like to run around and say the PDF is dead, or dying a slow, excruciating death. The fact of the matter, maybe it's true, but it's slow. Vast majority of people that we know are still publishing PDFs. You're taking XML and transforming it into HTML. Doc files, or Word documents, really essentially a type underneath the hood these days are really a type of markup, a type of XML. It's bastardized XML, but it's an XML the same. SVG is an XML-based graphic format. Okay. And sky's the limit. EPUB, mobile, all kinds of RSS feeds, all kinds of different other stuff. Okay, the basic idea is the same thing you see here. We have an XML file, we have DTDs, we have presentation rule style sheets, and based on the style sheets we can transform the document into something that looks nice. Okay, so we've gone through the first topic, Introduction to XML. Now we're going to dive down a little bit and talk about DITA. Okay, DITA is the acronyms for DITA is Darwin Information Typing Architecture. Okay. Now the whole Darwin thing. Now maybe we'll give you a hint. Remember I mentioned before that DITA has this uncanny ability to slide up and down that complexity and structure scale. Okay, so Darwin, is in the idea of inheritance and everything. That's what gives DITA that uncanny ability. It's called specialization. With DITA, you have something called specialization that allows you to, based on inheritance and other things, it allows you to basically either make your DITA more structured and more complex, or constrain it and make it less complex and less structured based on what your content needs to have. Okay, that's why it's called Darwin, the idea of specialization. DITA is what's called topic-based information development, whereas a lot of us are used to, in the olden days, right, or before DITA, we're used to taking Word and FrameMaker or whatever and making each file represents a chapter or even a whole document. So DITA is topic-based. Okay, you basically have individual topics or Lego blocks, and then you put those topics together, those Lego blocks together, to form a full document. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a lot of detail. Okay, DITA is not just a DDD, it's not just a document type definition, but it really is an architecture for designing content, for authoring content, and managing it and reusing it. Okay, so it's not really just like throwing together a bunch of tags and say, okay, I like procedure instead of task, and I need to have a task, I need to have a prerequisite, I need to have a follow-on. It's not just that. It's really a structure, and it's really a whole mechanism for how to reuse content and how to manage that content. Okay, tools that say that they support DITA don't just support DTDs. Okay, they need to support specific functionality that the DITA spec requires or specifies in it. Okay, DITA is an OASIS standard. It was developed by IBM and donated to the OASIS. DITA comes with an open toolkit, people call it DITA OT, for producing outputs. DITA OT is not really part of the standard, but it's an open toolkit that is developed, managed, and used by many people in the community, meaning people like you and me who are technical writers and technical writing groups and others. Right? It's a tool that's used for publishing. Okay, DITA facilitates categorization, minimalization, using the semantic tagging. Okay? So, first of all, what is semantic tagging? And we said before, semantics means meaning. Okay, so the tagging in DITA, for the most part, tries to impart some kind of meaning to the text that it contains. And that's what's called semantic tagging, as opposed to like HTML, where you have just formatting. I have a line, I have a list, I have a line item, I have a table, I have a font size, things like that. So DITA has what's called semantic tagging. DITA also facilitates what's called minimalization. Now, minimalization is not just taking an act and and then slaughtering your documents to make them have less words. Okay, it's really the idea of including information in a technical document only when and where it's useful. Okay, and there's a whole art to that. It's a skill to that, and something that more and more people are thinking about. When you think about, listen, I have content out there, people need to be able to read it. We want to make it useful. Okay, we all know that people have less and less attention span these days. If you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. But even us, like you and me, we have less and less patience to be reading stuff. So the idea of minimalization is to include content that's useful in the context that is there. Okay, and the semantic tagging helps. It basically kind of builds like a template, okay, or a boilerplate kind of. It helps us to put the content in there that's useful and some kind of a consistent structure. Okay, and it makes it a little more difficult to put stuff in there that's not relevant to what you're trying to write, or the presentation, or the how that content is being delivered. Okay, as we mentioned before, DITA has this facility for customization within the standard. Now, it used to be when people say customization was a buzzword for, let's take the standard, break it, hire some consultants for huge amounts of money, throw lots of money at a tool vendor, and get the standard exactly the way we want it, and then basically empty the coffers of the company. So DITA basically did doublespeak a little bit in order to create a new word called specialization. And really, specialization is a way to customize it, but still stay within the standard. It's kind of like breaking it, but still not breaking it. And so again, tools authoring tools, and other tools that support DITA will support something called specialization. It's a way of basically, changing your DTD in a legal way. Okay. Okay. DITA is open source. The DTD is the schemas. DITA open source are free. Okay. You can download them. You can start using them. And the cool thing about DITA is it has a very active user and development community. Whereas 5-6 years ago, where people were like, "Yes, DITA is just a trend. DITA is a trend. DITA is a new standard. Is it gonna?" Right now we're way beyond the tipping point. There's a lot of forums out there where people are very, very, very active. New people are coming all the time. People are very friendly. People are very open to helping. And this really is a kind of a nice community. That's because technical writers are friendly. So they're friendly about this also. So we mentioned before that DITA is a topic-based architecture. Okay, and that basically means that we have topics and maps. A topic is like those little Lego blocks. A topic is a piece of content, a concrete piece of document, document instance that is meant to answer one question. Okay, enough information to understand one concept, one procedure, or one set of reference information, or one thing to look up, or some kind of ancillary information. Okay, one. Okay, a map is basically taking those Lego blocks, those topics, and putting them together to form a deliverable. Okay, so if you want to make, you have a whole bucket of Legos, and you want to make a document, you want to make a book, you want to make a chapter, and then take a bunch of chapters and put them into a book, right? So that's what we use maps for. The maps are not just for taking those Lego blocks and plugging them together. Maps also allow you to define relationships between those topics using something called relationship tables, and those relationship tables are inside the map. And if you think about it, that's really kind of cool. The idea of being able to link information together without having to hard code that inside the information itself gives you a huge amount of power. Okay, let's say I have a Lego block. I have the red Lego and the green Lego. I have a task how to change oil in my car. Okay, and I have a reference material for a list of different types of oils for different models of cars. Okay, those two things, those two pieces of information are useful. They're relevant to each other. Okay, now I want to link them together. When I see the task that says changing the oil in my car, I want to see a link. I want to see the information about which oil I need to put inside the car. Okay, but instead of having to open up that task and hard code a link to the list of oil, and open up the oil and hard code a link back to the topic, to the task, the procedure, I can basically in my map I can make a table and say these two topics are related to each other. Okay, and then automatically during the publishing process, the see also links will be created inside the output. Okay, so you don't have to hard code the links. The DITA OT, the toolkit, the publishing format or engine will do that for you. It also gives you a lot of power because later on, if there's a new topic, not just oil, but now oil filters. Now we have a list of oil filters also, and that's another topic. So I don't have to open up every single topic that's now relevant to oil filters and hard code the link there and back and forth. Open up my table inside the map, okay, and then add it to the table. And then whenever I publish it, you're going to see it. And that's really the power of maps. The idea of maps is that I have a bunch of information pieces, and then inside the map I can put those pieces together either sequentially, hierarchically, or ontologically, or in forming relationships between them. Okay. We spoke before that DITA allows you to reuse content. So we talked about how reuse is useful because we have lots of different products. A lot of them are very similar. Sometimes we OEM our products. Sometimes we need to, But so DITA facilitates reuse of content in a number of different ways. I'm going to outline them now. And as we go through, the series, we'll see exactly how that works. So DITA allows you to assemble topics into deliverables. Okay, that's what we just talked about a few seconds ago. That's the map. Okay? DITA allows you to reference topic elements within other topics. What does that mean? That means I can actually take a piece of a topic and reference it or use it inside of another topic. That's what's called a content reference or a conref. Okay? Example. If I was in the same room with you, I'd ask you, can you give me an example? Okay, but we don't have that. We don't have that luxury, so I'm just going to spit it out. So example of that is, for example, a warning or a caution. Let's say I have a warning or a caution before doing any maintenance procedures on your vehicle. Make sure the emergency brake is on. Okay, and you use that over and over again. So you can take that warning, write it once, and that one warning, a caution, or whatever, you can reference that in multiple places, many topics. And that's what's called a conref. Okay? You can conditionalize your content. Okay, those of you who are using FrameMaker maybe have some experience with the idea of conditionalization, but the idea of specifying a piece of text, whether it be a word, or a paragraph, or a section, or a whole topic, right, or even a whole map, right, and say this content is conditional. It's conditional based on which product I am publishing this content for. It's conditional on which audience is meant for. It's conditional on when is this content is meant to be used, okay, etc., etc. Okay, and you can use your imagination about times when conditionalization is useful. Okay, in general, and I'm kind of skipping a little bit, but DITA has what's called conditional attributes, which allows you to specify when the content is relevant for a particular product, a particular platform, a particular audience, or you can make up your own. Okay, that's what's called conditionalization. Okay, the flip side, or really the twin, or the corresponding feature of DITA to conditionalization is the filtering. The idea of publishing the content based on those conditions to get your multi-purpose outputs. That's called the conditional processing. So I can say, okay, you know what? I have a topic and I'm changing the oil, right? And I use it for 3 different types of vehicles, okay? And depending on the type of vehicle, you need to change the oil after a certain amount of time driving the vehicle. So maybe a truck, it's 10,000 kilometers. And maybe for a car, 6,000 kilometers, and maybe for a tractor, it's 2,000 kilometers. I don't know, just making things up, right? So I can use the same topic. Maybe it's really the same procedure, but I can conditionalize some of the content based on how I'm publishing or which context I'm publishing the content. Okay. The other way of facilitating reuse is the ability to manage links separately from the content using those relationship tables, for example. Okay, remember we mentioned before that I can make links between the content using these relationship tables. So that's the idea of what I'm talking about here. There's also something in DITA called key refs, indirect addressing. It's really kind of outside the scope of this particular session. Maybe we'll talk about it next. Actually, we're planning on talking about it next time. But it's another way of managing relationships, managing the way content is being used outside the actual content. So you have your Lego blocks. A Lego block is a Lego block is a Lego block. And how you use those Lego blocks and how they link to each other based on the context, that's all managed outside. Okay, so what I want to do is talk about, before we wrap it up, I want to talk about a typical DITA toolset. Okay, so we talked a lot of theory, and next week we're going to talk a lot about the actual tags. Okay, you can actually see the tag, the elements, see how the whole thing works. But from a technology point of view, how do we, what do we need in order to get one of these things up and running? So, at a simple level, all you need is a tool that will allow you to write XML files. Okay, now really you can open up a Notepad, or Notepad++ or something like. You can use a text editor if you want, but it's really not so convenient. What an XML authoring tool will do is understand the DTD, understand that document type definition, that rule set, and say, okay, I'm writing my document, I'm writing my DITA topic, okay, what tags can I use when? It kind of helps me along and helps me to write content that's valid according to the standard, or, helps me kind of write content that's minimal and semantically correct according to the standard and to be consistent. Okay, so some of the tools out there, there's XML, there's Oxygen Author, FrameMaker you can use for authoring structured content. The authoring tool called Arbortext Editor. Now I have Word out there. Word is really not an XML editor. Okay, it really isn't. I mean, people say, you know, well, XML, Word is XML really, but Word is not really an XML editor. But the reason why I have it on this slide is that there are a number of vendors out there, Simply XML, Rocket Slides, a couple other ones, Quark, that have plugins to XML, to Word, that basically turn Word into an XML editor. Okay, but the idea is that you want an editor that understands structure, that understands rule set, understands DTD, and helps you to write content that works within that standard. Okay. Next thing would be useful to have. Now, really, what you could do is you could just have this authoring tool, and you'd be all set, right? You can start authoring content. Oops. Okay, a little bit too far. Okay. The next thing that many folks use is a content management system. A content management system is really like a repository. It's a database. It's a place to store all your content. So often what a lot of folks do, especially when they're starting out, is they will store their content, their DITA files, their topics, and their maps on a file system, you know, in your C drive or in your network drive. And that's usually just fine for the beginning. But soon, when you have, you have topics, and you're using those topics in maps, and you're reusing those topics in different maps, and there's overlap between maps and other maps, and maps are linked inside maps as chapters and books and publications, and you're having conrefs because you're reusing that wording all over the place, and you have relations tables. So you can imagine that with the power and the flexibility of DITA becomes a little bit of a headache of managing all that. Okay, so there are tools out there called a content management system, or really for DITA, a CCMS, or a component content management system, which allows you to manage all those topics, all those maps, all the images, all the media, all that stuff, and kind of understand where things are used, how they're used, etc. Helps you to create and manage your links. So, for example, let's say I make a relationship link between two topics inside of a map, right? And then I decide to rename my topic, or I decide to move it somewhere else on the repository or in a different folder. So what's going to happen? So you guys all know what's going to happen. And what's going to happen is your links are going to break, and that would really stink. Like broken links are they're just not fun, right? So CCMS is meant to manage all your links, manage your content using unique IDs, and that way you can kind of move things around, you can organize your content, you can restructure it, and still keep the links intact. Okay? Now, we have DITA, we have a repository, and the next thing we need is to publish it, right? So we can publish the content into our multiple formats, whether it be PDF or help, mobile formats, et cetera, using the DITA Open Toolkit that we spoke about before. Okay, and that's really an engine that takes DITA content, either from your file system or from your content management system. Okay, takes it, runs a whole bunch of procedures. Okay, we'll be talking about that in a lot of detail in one of our upcoming webinars, and then spits out an output. Okay, that's really basically the basic step. Now, often that's not enough, right? We have content, and we want to be able to dynamically publish it. More and more folks are talking about dynamic publishing, the idea of taking XML and being able to publish it on the fly, okay, or allow people to take topics and put together their own documents. Okay, let's, for example, let's say I have a couple of thousand pages, a couple of tens of thousands of pages, and I have customers who are using lots of different parts of my products. Like, wouldn't it be cool to be able to let them take different topics and then make their own book or their own publication or their own, little package and publish it? So that's something called dynamic publishing or dynamic documentation. Okay. Now, many of us, we mentioned before, are doing localization, and often what you'll see is some kind of a bridge between the content management system and your localization management system, whether it be world server or other types of systems that are out there. Okay, so often what you'll see is some kind of integration between the CMS and the localization management tool. Okay. Last thing we see is more on the authoring side is, or the content development side of being able to review that content. One of the cool things about DITA, we mentioned it before, is that if you're authoring your content and managing content in topic basis, or at least something smaller than an entire book, right? Then you can put that content through a review cycle for the SMEs, the source material, the subject matter experts, and let them review it. So a lot of CMS engines these days have a methodology or some kind of tool set for putting content through a review workflow. Okay, so this is really the basics of a typical DITA tool set that you'll see. And as you're going to think, if you're thinking about implementing DITA, you're going to start thinking, okay, what authoring tools should I choose? Okay, which when I'm talking about publishing, which output formats do I need? And based on that, what style sheets do I need to develop in order to configure the toolkit, the open toolkit, or the DITA accelerator, which is another type of tool, to get my outputs, to transform my XML into my various outputs. Okay, and you'll start thinking about, okay, which content management system am I going to choose? Okay, how much content do I have? How complex is my content? How many authors do I have? Am I a large organization with lots of business units that needs to share content, or am I a relatively small organization that maybe 2 or 3 writers? Okay. Am I doing localization? Do I need a translation management system? Right? Do I need to be able to send my topics for translation? Based on one book, or am I reusing my content into many different books? Am I translating to 1 or 2 languages, or 6 or 7 languages, or am I translating to 50 or 60 languages? So depending on all your requirements, that will inform your decision about, or the process of deciding which CMS to evaluate and to purchase and implement. Okay, we went through the first 2 bullets as promised. Okay, and I think we've got 5 minutes left before the hour is up. So at this point, I'm going to stop here. So before I open up for questions, I'd just like to thank you for joining us for part 2. We have the next session coming up next week. Everyone's welcome to join us. Be happy to have you. If you have any questions in the meantime or afterwards, there's my name and email address, and you're welcome to email me. Check us out on our website or on LinkedIn.